Okay, we are live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have a very special guest, a returning guest. His name is Jim Keillor, last name Keillor, excuse me. Just published a book in April. If you're watching this on YouTube, X, or Rockfin, you'll see the book cover. And that is I Know What I Saw, Assassinations and Terror in America. And he's been on my show before. We talked about his open source book that you can find online titled The Sirhan Timeline. And some of that material's in this book. But there's also, like, most of the book is this Oswald. He did an Oswald timeline at a very narrow scale of time, maybe 2 hours during the assassination of JFK on November 22nd, 1963. Very important, incredible day. It still reverberates through history. But he also includes information, some stuff I didn't know much about, San Bernardino massacre and the Stephen Paddock Las Vegas massacre that happened in 2017. But we can talk more about all the research he did in detail. He had some of the people he researched I've had on my show, McBride, who did a show on Tippit. So he has a lot of information that I wasn't aware of. But he can talk more about that. So, Jim Keillor, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me back on.
Cool. So for people who may have not, welcome back. For people who may not have heard our earlier show, maybe you can just talk briefly about your background, your research, and what led up to the publication of this new book, I Know What I Saw.
Yeah, well, I've been interested in the JFK assassination for, over 10 years. And as I just tweeted about it, that what set me down the path was just one day watching the Zapruder film on YouTube, and just the visceral horror of that moment just got me reading, and I started reading everything I could get my hands on, from Norman Mailer's book on Oswald to finally, luckily I came upon Oswald in the CIA, John Newman, and then that opened a big can of worms for me, and I started reading everything else. And then I discovered the Mary Farrell website, and I found her timelines, which are just vast and epic and incredible. And then I started thinking, well, I would like to start making my own timeline of just what happened that day, and really focus on maybe the 2-hour window from 12 o'clock to 2 o'clock, from before Oswald was a suspect, before JFK was killed, to the point that he was arrested. And what did everyone see? What did the witnesses see? And then how did the initial complication, that complicated event, become a much simpler event in the official narrative? And so how did that happen? What did people see? What was Oswald doing from minute to minute? So then I started compiling that, and it quickly grew to, I thought it would be 10 pages or something. I thought, well, it's 2 hours, it just, how much could there be? But then it grew and it grew and it grew. And like you said, Joseph McBride, I stumbled on his book. And then I realized, wait, I think he just called up J.D. Tippit's father, and he answered and agreed to an interview. And J.D. Tippit's father told him a bombshell about, I think, the fact that Tippit had been ordered to go and look for Oswald before Oswald was even an official suspect. So,
wow, yeah, that's amazing. It's just an amazing fact. And you write in your timeline that Tippit acted out of line with all of the other police in Dallas, right?
Yeah, and you can go back to Sylvia Meager's book, and I think she even questions. It's extremely bizarre that he was sent into the Oak Cliff neighborhood of Dallas when there was no reason at all for him to be there. It was nowhere near the Texas School Book Depository. It wasn't near Love Field or Parkland Hospital. That's where all the police were. And so, yeah, McBride really fills in a lot of the Tippit narrative, and I put that in there. And I focus a lot on basically when Tippit was shot and where Oswald could have been, like whether Oswald could have made it to that area from his rooming house. And it's just clear that it's impossible. And also another oddity that I discovered from this timeline is that everything kind of happened too soon. For instance, the police started looking for Oswald too soon. And also Oswald got, from this timeline, I believe that Oswald arrived at the movie theater while J.D. Tippett's killer was still running down an alleyway and hiding in a parking lot. So that's just an unavoidable conclusion. And so Oswald arrived at the movie theater too soon. And then I believe also that the police went to the movie theater too soon, before they should have, and in incredibly large numbers, So that's what I get. Why I started thinking a timeline is really the way I want to do this, because I want to see when everything happened, and then from that, if you read it, I think what emerges is that Oswald left the school book depository too soon. Like I said, the police started looking for him before they should have. He arrived at the movie theater too soon. The police arrived there too soon. He couldn't have arrived at the spot where J.D. Tippit was shot. So it becomes like the Keystone Cops or something.
It's incredible that much happened in that short of a space of time. Like the shooting of Kennedy happened at what, 12:30? What was the actual time?
12:30.
12:30. Yeah. So by like 1 o'clock, Oswald is at the theater, like something super fast, right?
Well, it was crazy. Yeah, for initially, first of all, he's on the bus incredibly quickly. He is on a bus that's going back towards Dealey Plaza. Within minutes after 12:30. So what he had to have done is impossible. It's even in the JFK movie, which I think is still a really solid look at the events. But I also say in here, I list all the things he would have had to have done to get on that bus by something like 12:34, 12:35, several blocks away from the building. And then, yeah, he's very calm, he's not acting like he just shot the president. He gets off the bus, takes a cab, is pretty calm, offers the cab to a woman who's waiting there. He's not
right. He doesn't understand, changes his clothes, right? Grabs a gun.
Yeah. And then goes outside at like 1:03, 1:04 and waits for the bus. Earlene Roberts, his landlady, said, oh, he was just standing there waiting for the bus. And then, probably in my timeline, I think it's T.F. Bowley, who is the guy who said at 1:10, this is like almost a mile away, he came upon J.D. Tippett's body. So, it's just ridiculous. And
it's not possible.
Yeah, it's not possible. And then what I also do is, I look at some of the other accounts from people like Jim Bishop or William Manchester and even Vincent Bugliosi, just to show the reader how this how the initial event, which was much more complicated, became the lone nut narrative, and how that's been perpetuated over the decades. And so people are adjusting this timeline to try to make it make sense. And, these people, Vincent Bugliosi just kind of willy-nilly changes the times when Oswald gets certain places just to make everything.
Wow, to make it make sense. Wow, that's incredible. Yeah. So there's the guys out there, the lone nut. What do you call them? They're really the real conspiracy theorists. Are the lone nutters, because it's not plausible. And the strange thing is so the president of the United States gets shot and Oswald goes on the move. So instead of staying there and sitting around, that's inexplicable too. How did he get orders, or was he pre-ordered, or what? Why did he decide to go to the Texas Theater of all places?
And
Was that question ever answered? I don't know if that's been answered.
He just said, I went to the movies. But, the cops, for some reason, this idea got out on the police. I look at the police transcripts from that day. So that's part of this timeline, because that's just transcripts. You can listen to them and you can read them online. And that is just what they're being told from different sources. And you keep seeing in these police transcripts, when the call goes out, oh, the killer of J.D. Tippit is in a movie theater, the Texas theater. He's in the balcony. They keep saying the balcony. And then they all went to the balcony. In all their reports, they said, we first went up to the balcony. And you don't see, I think it's Johnny Brewer, who was the one who called the police. He's the guy who was working at a shoe store. And he said, Oswald walked past my shoe store like a maniac. And by that time, I don't even think he would have heard that a policeman had been shot, half a mile away or whatever. So, but even though he claims he did. And so he never says he saw Oswald in the balcony. No one saw him there. But the police keep saying he's in the balcony, he's in the balcony. So, I mean, to me, these people behind the scenes who are calling the shots just are like these ghostly figures that have to emerge out of this timeline, that someone was telling the police, our man is waiting in the balcony. I mean, I think Oswald was told to go there to meet up with his handler or something. And in the heat of the moment, he forgot to go to the balcony, or he didn't, or there's some miscommunication.
It's just strange. Yeah, it's so mysterious. And I mean, one of the things I think I noted reading through your Oswald timeline was that the Secret Service are all over the assassination and seem to be puppeteering the Texas or Dallas PD. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, because or whoever was pretending to be Secret Service. Now, this is something you see in so many people's statements, that I encountered some Secret Service guys in Dealey Plaza after the assassination. People keep saying this. Even Oswald mentioned that in his interview to Captain Fritz, I think, that, he gave directions to some Secret Service guys as he was leaving the building. But multiple bystanders said, oh yeah, there are these Secret Service guys. But there, if you read Vincent Palomara, he has a great couple of books about the Secret Service on that day. There were no Secret Service agents in Dealey Plaza after the event. I believe maybe one, but they all went to either Parkland Hospital or I think Love Field. So these people who were impersonating Secret Service agents were not Secret Service agents, or they were unofficial or something. And I believe they were giving the police information on Oswald, like almost 1244 or something. This description of the shooter from Howard Brennan, this guy who's 90 yards away, says, oh yeah, he was 5'10", 165 pounds, 30 years old. He's basing that off of like seeing Oswald in the 6th floor. But that same description was in Oswald's CIA file going back years, I think as early as 1959. That's how the CIA is describing him: 5'10", 30 years old, 165 pounds. And that's totally wild.
He's 24, right? I think he was 24 when he got shot by Ruby.
Yeah, 24. He was like maybe 150 pounds, maybe like 5'8". But this same description goes out, is given to the police. And that's something you see in his CIA files. And that, that's something that John Newman, he's like really the expert on the CIA history, the history of the Oswald file in the CIA. So he's
right. What did he? I think his book was Oswald and the CIA, if I remember. He's still around. I saw him on a show sometime this year, 2024.
Oh, great! Yeah, I know he has a whole new series.
Is that right?
Of books, yeah, looking into really like a longer history of like, I think it's like 4 or 5 books looking into the CIA and the Cuba, the Bay of Pigs, just kind of the bigger historical context. But he's great.
He's one of those guys that I was in contact with, but I could never pin down for an interview. Like I tried, so I got to reach back out to him.
Yeah, his book, like I said, it just blew me away because he's just looking at the files, and you cannot make it up. There's no crazy conspiracy theories, and something was definitely odd and out of the ordinary with the way the CIA disseminated their information on Oswald going back to 1959 when he defected or tried to defect to Russia, whatever you call that. So that's part of what
Oswald
I looked
was
at.
special. There was something special about Oswald.
Yeah.
There was something strange about him, going back all the way probably back to 55 and the Civilian Air Patrol, which is almost like a Gladio group without the kind of Gladio name. It's like this guy from a very early age, from 15, was chosen for something. But I mean, whether they just made him an asset and turned him into a patsy, I don't know. But
yeah, and when that happened and how it happened, I mean, a lot of literature has gone out about that. So, I just realized there's a lot of books that people have already written. So I wanted to focus on just what happened minute to minute during the event. And
you kind of go. I mean, continue. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Well, like, for instance, first of all, how quickly he got on the bus, and then how he behaved immediately after the event, and then how the police behaved. So Captain Fritz, I believe, is supposedly hears from Roy Truly. Roy Truly was the superintendent of the Texas School Book Depository. He supposedly hears that Oswald is missing, but a lot of people were missing from the building because they shut down the building, and a lot of people weren't allowed back in. So there's this idea that comes out, or this claim that Roy Truly did a roll call at some time, and depending on whose account you read, the roll call is at all these different times. I don't believe a roll call ever happened, and I don't believe when they say, "Oh, Lee Harvey Oswald is the one missing person," because a lot of people were missing, including one of his coworkers who was had a narcotics rap. He was a narcotics offender. He was missing. There were many people who had left the building during the motorcade and were not allowed back in after the assassination. And so then Captain Fritz goes back to City Hall to try to find more information on Lee Harvey Oswald. Why Oswald? And this is before Oswald's been arrested, and and before he even knew that J.D. Tippit had been shot. So they start looking for Oswald too soon.
Right.
So that's just
right. So he's already selected, and you kind of go into Oswald and the news of the parade route too. Like, how would have Oswald have known the time and the parade route and all that, right? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, and that's also something that Vincent Palomara does a really good job of. But yeah, I did I went into where was the parade route, where was it, how was it communicated to the public? And there were some newspapers that had published it, but there was this last minute turn down, I guess, Elm Street, that was maybe a day, like maybe had been made the day before. There's no evidence that Oswald had any knowledge of this parade route. You don't see the newspaper in his possession. That morning he asked one of his coworkers, "Oh, why are all these people gathering here?" And someone said, "Oh yeah, the president's coming through." And Oswald goes, "Oh, okay." And so, yeah. And then again, Vincent Palomara is really the go-to person on the parade route and the way the Secret Service was involved in this. And then you can get into the mayor of Dallas and all of that, the owner of the Texas School Book Depository. But really, it branches off in a million different directions. But I just wanted to look at, how would he have known that this is where the motorcade would have gone?
Right. It's unlikely. He would have had to been studying, right? Like the paper every day to try to figure it out. It's so random. And you said that you kind of the conclusion, he was on the second floor eating lunch or doing something else, but there were people on the 6th and 4th. People were
Yeah.
casual observers were seeing people in the building, right?
Yeah. And then, there's a couple of guys who, one guy was eating his lunch right in the sniper's nest, as early as late as like 12:15 or 12:20. And they find his lunch right there, this bag of his lunch. Um, and the and then if you listen to the radio broadcasts, which hopefully are still on YouTube, it's really fascinating because they keep announcing bullets have been found on the third floor, a rifle has been found on the third floor or the fourth floor or the fifth floor. They keep announcing guns and bullets are found all over this building. And then they are announcing like, oh, someone was just arrested in the building. Someone who didn't work there. That's in my timeline. Someone who was apparently let go later. So it's totally nuts. And people, and then lots of people are saying, oh, of course there's the famous Mauser, which the rifle that they keep saying that they found on that day. But then that gets changed to a Mannlicher Carcano. So I'm just recreating what was experienced by those people moment to moment. And, also in the radio broadcasts, you hear, I think, Jean Hill and Mary Mormon, you hear them interviewed at about 1:30, like an hour afterwards, on the radio live. She's saying, oh yeah, I was standing on the grass and this person fired from behind the fence up on the grassy knoll. And then I saw him running away. And she was about 15 feet away from Kennedy. And so several people see this and they say it on the radio. This is quickly after the event. So, I'm also interested in when these people made their testimony, because your memory changes over time. So the sooner after the event, probably the more likely it is that that's what you saw, which is something I look at with the San Bernardino thing as well. That was
like what they really saw. But there were like the testimonies changed. There was one guy who got shot in the head and then re-changed, right? So the stuff that happened right in that 1 hour period is probably more authentic than anything I would probably.
Yeah. Or, there were police reports that are people's eyewitness accounts were taken that day, the next day, in the next following few days, and in the following couple of weeks. But then, very quickly the official story gets put out there, and it's in Life magazine. I think Life magazine had their big article before the Warren Commission even finished. And so Life magazine has the official narrative in something like January or February of 1964. And then, of course, it's going out all over the media. So then it just starts being repeated and repeated and repeated. And people like Jean Hill, or all these people who saw shooters behind the fence, these people who ran up there, or even what the police were saying to each other immediately after the event in the police transcripts. You can read this. All of that stuff gets swept aside, and basically the official narrative gets created,
and I think it's solidified. I think that they successfully solidified that. That's what I learned in high school. I believed that until maybe Search and Crack started in my 20s, just talking to random people, because there was really no internet or way to exchange information. And so you'd run into a casual person, but it's remarkable. And you mentioned in your book that history itself was manipulated. And I think a lot of people, you could probably ask the common man, I bet it's 75, 80, 85 now, do not believe Oswald did it. But back in the day, I think that was inverted. It was probably 10 or 15%. Would you agree with that? That think that Oswald did it maybe in 65 or 70?
I'm sure there were people questioning it, like Mark Lane. Sylvia Meager's book came out in the 60s, and also obviously Jim Garrison. But they were portrayed as Looney Tunes, and they were completely, at least Jim Garrison was completely railroaded and infiltrated, but it makes it even more impressive that people like them, those early researchers, got their material out there. And movies like JFK, I'm still blown away that Oliver Stone had the guts to do it, and had the knowledge to get so much of it factually correct, I believe, and before the internet. And so there were, people, these heroic people, came forward and said, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. And also, really, my book is dedicated to all of these witnesses. So just to me, it's a heroic act to just say what you saw, and honestly tell the world what you saw when it doesn't add up, when it doesn't.
And some of those people died. Those witnesses, they knew. I think that there's a whole nother, maybe there's a JFK researcher. I know that there's hit list, but the story of the people like Roger Craig, you mentioned in your book, they tried to kill him like 2 or 3 times, and then he died. Like, he knew that he was targeted, and I think he was a truth teller.
I think he's the one who saw someone he thought was Oswald run out of the building immediately after the assassination and get into a car, a Nash Rambler, that was driven by someone else. I think that was Roger Craig, and
I think so. Yeah, I think you're right.
And I mean, who was that? I mean, because then other people are seeing Oswald on the bus at that time. So
yeah, it's so weird. Like, he's driven around. Payne drives him from New Orleans to Dallas, and then he gets in somebody else's car. He's being driven around, like he's being seen in New Orleans with Ferry and the other guy. Like, he's always being driven around. It's so weird. Like, he didn't have his own car, but it's like this massive
and there's this whole history of him in Dallas with George de Mohrenschildt, this white Russian guy from an aristocratic old Russian family, and this is Oswald, supposedly the big Marxist, hanging out with this guy, is his best friend in Dallas. He's like this huge communist or whatever. But there was that Ruth Payne documentary that came out a few years ago, and that was a great one.
Yeah, really good. Good was, I think, the director's name. Really superb piece of work, and solidifies how strange she was, Ruth Payne. I mean, there's so many curious characters around Oswald that it's just bizarre. Ruth Payne was like moneyed and everything, and weird characters just around Dallas. There's so many weird relationships between like the Cabell family and the guys who had the school book depository, who got him the job there. I think she got him the job at the school book depository, right?
Yeah, and like I said, the owner of the school book depository is a fishy character who had allies with lots of hardcore right wingers in the Dallas area. And there's Earl Cabell. Was he the mayor of Dallas? And his brother was in the CIA, I believe.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
At one point, I toyed with the idea of making another timeline of what Jack Ruby did during those 2 days, because I started looking into it, and this guy almost did not sleep for those entire 2 days. I mean, he was all over the place. So he's a whole separate complication.
A whole separate thing. But my understanding, what's your opinion on the view that Ruby was the one who they were supposed to kill Oswald at the scene or leaving the scene? And so clean it up, and that Ruby was the one with his connections to the police or something to make that happen. And when it didn't happen, he was tasked with the deal to go kill Oswald. Have you ever heard that theory?
I have heard that, and I believe in my timeline he's even at Parkland Hospital at one point during those 2 hours. I think someone sees him there. And he's all around the scene of the crime. He's nearby, and I didn't follow him, but it would be interesting to see what he was doing that whole time. But I believe he started to panic, and I wouldn't be surprised if he was supposed to get rid of Oswald sooner and didn't manage to do it.
And that maybe is why Tippit was sent to Oak Cliff, right? Is like he was in kind of they say he was speeding around, like going somewhere, speeding somewhere else, speeding off. like
And
acting
then,
theory, like or something.
yeah, and obviously getting his orders from someone who's not the dispatcher, someone who doesn't show up in the transcripts. And Joseph McBride goes into tons of detail on that. And yeah, and I believe he was sent to look for Oswald in Oak Cliff because that's the neighborhood where he lived, and he was driving all over the place madly looking for him. And I don't speculate too much on who killed Tippit, but we can imagine that he several scenarios. I mean, the actual conspirators met with him there, and maybe there had to have been an argument where he threatened to go public with what was going on, or because why else would he need to be executed in that way? That he was going to blow the lid off of this or something.
Right. Something
And
strange. Yeah.
yeah, like maybe this other person was also looking for Oswald that he encountered. And because why else would they be in Oak Cliff, and how would they just happen to come upon Tippit? And what otherwise? Why would someone need to kill him?
Right. Something odd, like he didn't fulfill his role or something. Like maybe
Yeah.
they had these cops that were going to kill Oswald and be heroes, and then
Uh-huh.
it was a fait accompli. Like Oswald was a communist and move on. You know. So.
Yeah, and Earlene Roberts, his landlord, mentions that around 1 o'clock, while he was in the building, in the house, a police car rolls up outside, and she's sitting there watching them. And I forget if they honked or something, but Oswald ignores them, and then they drive off. And she clearly stated that she saw that. So
Right. Maybe that was them to try to get him to come out, and so they could shoot him
yeah,
or something. Who knows? Like,
yeah, they were supposed to be looking for him, and I don't know why they drove off, and if they knew that was where he lived. But also, no one had named him as a suspect by that point. It was only 1 o'clock. I don't think they had even noticed that he was missing from the building. So, and that's another part of the timeline that doesn't add up, because there's all these different accounts of when the police were informed that Lee Harvey Oswald is an employee here who's missing. And the question is, why did they think that was suspicious? Because a lot of people were employees there who were not in the building anymore. So there's no answer to that.
right. So that is a very detailed. I mean, so half your book is just timelining, but you can learn so much about this whole situation from reading that timeline, because they're just things that don't over. I mean, the cover story, the narrative, the commissions, is it's not tenable. I mean, it's changed. It changed, but it's just there's no way what happened, what they said happened in the Warren Commission is real. Yeah.
And I mean, you could read it as a narrative, almost like a strange postmodern paranoid novel, almost, as a narrative, or you can use it just as a reference to see like what was happening at this time, what was happening at that time.
Right. And so as far as the Sirhan timeline, did you update it, or is basically the same one that you have or had?
It's the one we talked about in the last show. It's all the same timeline. I haven't added a lot. I haven't added anything to it since then, but I just started looking at all of this research I had been doing. Sirhan, Lee Harvey Oswald, the San Bernardino massacre, Las Vegas. And I started realizing, wait, there's a longer story here that goes back 60 years. And it's the story of how the national security state has evolved in their control methods, in the way they set up these events, in the way these events serve certain policy purposes. And there are some writers who've done really good work explaining that historical trajectory, like Peter Dale Scott. The Road to 9/11 is a great example of that. Also, Wendy Painting, Aberration in the Heartland of the Real. I was definitely thinking about her book when I was writing this, because she goes into the larger historical context behind the Oklahoma City bombing. And so I started realizing there is a thread here of this national security state that we are currently living with, this post 9/11 situation that started long ago. And I think the Kennedys were the last obstacle in the way of the intelligence community. And once they were gone, you have Nixon, who vastly expands what a presidential powers, and that's a genie that was never put back in its box with Operation Chaos, the Houston Plan, the Phoenix Plan in Vietnam, or Project Phoenix or whatever. You see this apparatus of counterinsurgency and counterterrorism being created, and then Cheney and Rumsfeld, who got their political start really under Nixon, kind of learning from his playbook, then are later creating the Patriot Act and the war on terror later on.
All over 9/11, right? I mean, all over.
And I mean, I've done my own 9/11 research, but I really feel like there's very little that hasn't been written about 9/11 and published. So I wanted to focus on lesser known or just other events like the San Bernardino and Las Vegas, because as far as I know, there's no book about either of those events. So
there's a couple good documentaries of different takes on Las Vegas. What's your take on Paddock and the Las Vegas massacre? Was it October 1st, 2017, I think?
Yeah, well, I just looked at I had been researching it for years, since it happened, but it wasn't until 2023, last year, when the FBI released all of their files, and they're heavily redacted. I mean, to the point that the Las Vegas Review-Journal said in their headline was, "What are they hiding?" I mean, and so it's not a bunch of conspiracy theorists, but
they're hiding a lot.
Yeah, and if you look through these documents, you see, even with the redactions, you see Paddock was in contact with other people leading up to the massacre, that these people have never come forward. He was seen talking loudly and angrily about conspiracy theories with another man in a restaurant days beforehand, talking about Ruby Ridge, Waco, the same stuff that infuriated Timothy McVeigh. Now Paddock is talking to other people about this stuff. He's seen at events where he would have needed an invite. He's at all these gun shows. He's seen drunk the couple days before with an Asian woman on several occasions. He rarely drank, but someone saw him drunk with this Asian woman a couple days beforehand. And you see that he had a dramatic mental breakdown, I guess you could call it, a decline in his mental health, starting about a year before the event. And also, he's been, an enormous amount of his data is being collected at these casinos and shared with FinCEN, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. That's part of the Treasury Department. And so the casinos filed 200 reports on Stephen Paddock with FinCEN, in the months leading up to this. And so that goes through multiple government databases, shared with multiple government agencies. He had like these loyalty cards at these casinos. They share all of that information with law enforcement, these casinos, and with other casinos. And so also he worked for the government for over 10 years. He started working for the government when his father was on the FBI's most wanted list. His father was a notorious bank robber. And so he was under the government's eye, I guess you could say, from age 7. There's a report of in 1960, the FBI raiding his house. Neighbors remembered taking little Stephen fishing when the FBI was raiding his house. And then his father's sent to jail in like 1960 or something. And then his father escapes from jail. And then he's on the FBI most wanted list throughout the 70s. And that's at that point in the mid 70s, he starts working at the post office. And then, he works for the government for the next 10 years. He works for several government contractors. I think one of the companies that then later became Northrop Grumman, like in the defense as an auditor. Yeah, I think as an auditor, because he was like a he did accountant work, and so for most of his life, he's on the government's radar, and then he's the high roller at these casinos, and they are collecting massive amounts of data on him. These gun shows, people need to know if they go to gun shows, the government, the ATF, they're collecting massive amounts of data on you. They're looking at they monitor everyone's cars, and they're informants all over the place. The DEA, the ATF, they're informants going wild out there. I put in some of that in the final part of my book, that it's really the Wild West. These informants are not regulated. They're authorized to break the law. They're given tons of money, and they're out there trying to entrap people into committing all these acts of terror.
It's unbelievable. I think just the FBI's yearly payouts are like $500 million to all their informants. It's extraordinary amount of money.
It's crazy. And there's so many. I don't know if you might have followed that Twitter account, Boltzmann Booty.
Yeah.
He was a great researcher. And he said he tweeted something that one person got offended by, and then Twitter just suspended him. All that research he posted on his Twitter account is gone. So that's when I decided, okay, I need to write a book, because anything could happen to my Twitter account. Like these threads I've been posting, those could go away. So, but anyways, he did a lot of work on how many mass shooters in the past, since 2000 or something, have had FBI contacts. We're being monitored by the FBI. We're in contact with FBI informants. So that's a whole.
It's a lot. It's a long list, right? I mean, it's just on and on and on. These guys have all kinds of weird connections.
And that's on Boltzmann Booty's Substack. He has a Substack, and he has a good article on that. So I had to talk about that, because it's definitely I'm just looking at the fact that so many people, the night of the Las Vegas massacre, believed that they were being shot at inside the concert grounds, or saw gunmen around the Strip that night, reported gunmen going into multiple casinos, saw gunmen coming into casinos, and heard gunshots in the casinos long after Paddock was dead. So to me, something more complicated happened that night. And
shots from helicopters. There's actual diagrams of people getting shot from above and from angles that didn't come from the Mandalay Bay. It's super suspect.
Yeah, people getting shot in areas that were out of the range of where Paddock was standing. And I think there were teams of gunmen going around the Strip. I don't know if they were in the concert grounds, because if this was a big operation, I don't think they would have wanted to be in the line of fire. They would know Paddock was going to be shooting directly at them. So I'm not sure if they were in the concert grounds, but I believe that these witnesses saw gunmen around the area and in the casinos. And I have lots of accounts of that in the final section of my book.
Right. I mean, and there's a lot there. Fusion Center, San Bernardino, the San Bernardino massacre.
Yeah.
But we are at the 43-minute mark. Do you have time for a few questions?
Sure. Yeah.
Jim, John asked, do you believe that exhumations of Tippit and JFK would be required to reopen an investigation, given that the government refuses to release other docs under FOIA?
Well, would be required to it would be great to do that, but that especially with JFK, but since his brain is missing, and there's I don't know how much you would learn from that. I think it was David Mantic. He's a neuroscientist. I think he did a great book called Kennedy's Head Wounds, where he goes into the X-ray imagery, and he shows that multiple bullets came from multiple angles. Tippit, I don't know if that would reveal very much about whoever shot him, but I think the evidence from Oswald's gun and from the bullets that were recovered from his body shows that probably Oswald did not shoot. Those bullets didn't come from his gun. So yeah, the forensics is a whole separate issue that's another rabbit hole, definitely.
And I mean, you have other stuff in this book. You kind of talk about the constellation of control, how all these events are so similar going back to JFK. They involve terror, mind control, psychological abuse of the population. And you actually liken it to kind of a Hamlet, like Hamlet's journey, right? Can you kind of maybe close up with that?
Yeah, I can end with that because I am an English teacher. So as I've been researching all this stuff, I teach Hamlet to my students, and I keep noticing, wait a second, this is the same story. Hamlet's father has been assassinated, and this usurper stands on the throne, and he's told by the ghost of his father, you need to avenge my death. But he doesn't know if that's really the ghost of his father or if it's a demon sent to entrap him and to entice him into evil. So, like us, he has to establish Claudius's guilt. He has to find some way of proving it. And so he's going nuts and pretending to be nuts while he's doing this to evade Claudius's suspicions. So finally, he does the play. He puts on this play, and Claudius reacts with extreme guilt. And then Hamlet has a sense of calm after that, almost like now he no longer has to establish the truth. He knows it. And so I think that's the position a lot of us find ourselves in as we research these events, that we know something doesn't add up. We know it doesn't make sense. And there are these witnesses who saw things that don't go along with the official story. And it can feel like we're going insane until we know for a fact what happened. And so that's kind of our journey. Any of us who are interested in these issues, I think it's kind of Hamlet's journey.
I think you're right. I think that there's definitely something analogous going on. Where's the best place for people to get I Know What I Saw?
Oh yeah, Amazon. It's on Amazon as a Kindle download or as a paperback. And so you can just look that up. Jim Keillor, I Know What I Saw. And yeah, I'm on Twitter at @books_rum if you do want to follow me. But yeah, Amazon is the place to get the book.
Cool. And I will put a link to your Twitter or X handle feed so people can check that out. And if they want to contact you, they can contact you there. And then also, it's a really it's superbly researched book. It's 400 pages. It's got a lot of content, stuff that we did not cover in the time allotted for this interview. But again, the full title is I Know What I Saw, Assassinations and Terror in America. And the author is Jim Garrison Keillor. So thanks so much for your time.
Okay, thanks a lot. This was fun.
Take care. Yeah, I enjoyed it. Stay there. Stay there. Stay there.